Recording in progress.
Hey, this is Tor Allen with the Rahus Institute Solar Schoolhouse. Here to walk you through a walking tour of Sebastopol we did recently on July 29th, 2023 as part of Sebastopol Walks. And I just want to record and share some of these sites that we stopped and talked about with you in case you missed the walk or want to revisit it. So this picture is just showing how the map, I don't have a way to mark those stops, but it's about a 3.5 mile loop that we did starting at the plaza in town. And this is a group of folks that met up that day. This is a little closer up of the map, although that's not as important. So our first stop was in the plaza, and we walked over to a post over near one of the bike racks that had this sign on it. It said solar charging station, and it was installed in the late 90s by Zap World as a solar charging station for their electric scooters and electric bikes. This was simply 2 solar panels that are still on top of the pole, though shaded by a lot of tree cover. And the 2 solar panels basically go down to the bottom of the post. You can see that in the lower left-hand corner, these 2 sockets. You can plug in your charger basically and charge up your battery. It's not clear if those are still working, but the tree would probably need to be trimmed to get some unshaded solar charging at this point. So from there we walked over to the police station, and to give a little background about the police station and other installations that happened in Sebastopol in the 2000s, we need to talk about Solar Sebastopol. Solar Sebastopol was I give Marty Roberts credit for instigating this whole effort. It was a community effort there was a goal set to install 1 megawatt of solar. This was back in 2003 by 2005. And it got started with all kinds of these couple of fairs that were held down in the plaza. You can see some of the participants there. Harmony Farm Supply was a participant, etc. And so Solar Sebastopol was this big effort to collaborate and get more solar installations on both city buildings and out in the community. So here we can see the police station system. Again, this was installed in about 2003. One unique thing about the systems back then is you can see that there's some triangular solar modules on the roof. So that's a little more architecturally looking better than just having a rectangle on a triangular space. So these days it's difficult to find a triangular solar module, also known as a solar panel. But at the time, though, there were several companies making those types of panels so that they could put a system in like this to make it look good. So the city is benefiting from these systems, again, since it's about 20-year time frame right now, and that helps reduce the amount of electricity that's purchased from PG&E by generating their own power, a portion of their own power. So just to be clear that this system and most of the systems that we see on this walk are still grid connected, so that each of the buildings get power both from the solar system and also the utility grid. And so it's a commonality for all of these. From there, we walked up to Annalee High School, and you can see this. This is in front of the library. It's an obelix/sundial, and this sundial was built back in 2000. This is a photo of Dave Casey up in the left-hand cover. He was a math teacher at Annalee for many years. And he shared recently with me that this obelix, by the way, are historically made for all sorts of reasons. But in this case, Dave worked with his students to incorporate some solar geometry as well. So he shared with me that it was an informal geometry class. In other words, not a college prep type of class. And they were assisted by the Sebastopol Center for the Arts, which was trying to pair local artists with schools to support both the artists and students. An artist named Tony Sheets worked with them, who also helped with surface sculpture of a tiger on the wall in another building. And just the obelix was a focus of a curriculum that it was Dave's way of teaching scale, proportion, along with volume, surface area, and trigonometry. The students made up mock drawings, models, completed all the physical construction work to install the obelix and concrete pad directly to its north. So when it was all completed, the shadow of the obelix at noon every day fits exactly inside the concrete sidewalk in front of it. And on the solstice and equinox, the tip of the shadow should land in the center of the tiles marked with those special dates. So they did a little bit of solar. So there's a little bit of solar right here, just understanding the sun path and all that that goes into understanding planet solar. This obelix actually is a registered sundial on North American Sundial Society, and I'll post the link to that in the notes of this video. So moving on to another location at Annalee High School is the shop building, which was a solar Sebastopol project back in 2005. And what's really cool is the shop building, Annalee High School being a 100-year-old school, parts of it, this particular building has this sawtooth roof, which is perfect for a solar electric array because that side's facing south, while the north side is it has windows and can still provide light to the buildings. This is a photo of Pete Blair of Community Collaborative Energy, and Marty Webb, the principal, at the finish of the system. Here you can see a little closer up of some of the panels and the inverter on the left. So the sorry. So fast forward to 2011, and the Annalee High School managed to put in a 500 kilowatt system. If we go back to the shop building, I didn't write that down, but that was still only 28 kilowatts, and here we are with 500 kilowatts. It's in the form of a carport shade structure over the parking area. And some of the unique things, first of all, I put these in wrong order, but I want to give a shout out to the student that made this all happen. And her name is Mia Zarvis. She was the president of Students for Sustainability back in 2009. and 2010. And my daughter had just started going to school at Annalee then, and was telling me about what the Students for Sustainability was up to, and that they wanted to put solar on the whole school and produce most of its power, which is super ambitious, millions of dollars. And I thought, dare I say, impossible. But this student, Mia, kept at it, and she researched how other schools were doing this, how they were funding it, and how they were doing it, and shared all this information with then Superintendent Keller McDonald, who eventually took it on and helped make it happen. So I just share this because it's, the power of students. Students don't realize sometimes the power they have. And I remember talking with Keller when he retired. He said, I couldn't say no to a really good student idea. So there you have it. Now, backing up a little bit, I do want to say that the rules or policy of the time was that you had to wire sections of the solar array. It looks like one big continuous array, but you had to wire sections of it to wire over to smaller inverters and smaller utility meters. So that's changed. That created a lot of extra trenching and a lot of extra work. I'm not clarifying that too clearly, but today you wouldn't have to do all that because of some rule changes. I'm bouncing around here. The other thing that was interesting of the day is like how to pay for this. And so either if you're going to own it, no tax credits because the schools don't pay taxes, so they couldn't benefit from that. The other option of the day, and is still available today, is doing what's called a power purchase agreement, where a third party owns the system and then charges the school a certain rate that should be cheaper than the utility rates, so they'd end up saving money. But the school basically passed a bond measure, so the system is paid for by local property taxes. And there was a bunch of projects that were going to be done, and so they did this first in the summer of 2011, so that they could start making money on this. They're making money by saving money. And here's a little poster that gives some specs on how many panels and how much energy is expected to be saved. So, and there's an aerial photograph of the smaller array on the shop building and the bigger array in the parking lot. And I will say that by the time nowadays, most school systems are put on carports in parking lots because it's a lot easier and quicker to have a pre-engineered carport built, improved and built at a school versus doing the engineering and analysis of an existing building to see that they're structurally sound. The California state architect has a really thorough and in-depth and lengthy process to analyzing and approving, adding any weight to the existing building. So that would have taken a couple of years to get approved, whereas the parking lot structure system got approved and installed over a summer. So you'll see a lot more of those, and you're still seeing a lot more of those being installed at many schools today. So in addition to all I should say that the solar system combined generates today approximately 60 to 70% of the school's annual energy usage. So that's pretty significant amount and a pretty significant savings. So, but also, the other part of solar energy at schools is not necessarily just what goes on powering the school, but what goes on inside the classroom. And so our students learning about this wonderful technology and by getting to explore it themselves. So here's a photo of a group of students from Annalise Eco Action class of what year? I don't remember, 2013 maybe, 14, making solar cell phone chargers. We actually partnered with, Annalie had an Eco Action class at the time. So we partnered on a few different things, including making solar emergency preparedness kits for families. We held a solar oven making workshop, again, for the community and families to come out and build their own solar oven. That was in 2012. Also, I say that all of these things have a journalism possibility. So when the system was being installed in 2011 at Annalie, I was aware of the process, and I encouraged my daughter, who was a student there at Annalie, to go down and interview a few of the folks there and write an article. So she did, and that showed up in the school newspaper in the fall when the system was completed. So journalism is important to, share stories about what's going on in the place you live and around you. And it's something to explore further with students. We also did some student work classes, environmental studies classes that evaluated how well the solar arrays performed. And this is just a chart showing that I think it's the blue. Well, it shows that the blue was the estimated performance or production each month, and the green was the actual. And the chart there shows if it was producing more or less than estimated. So the students analyzed this, looked at some online data that was historical data that was being collected, and produced this chart. They then shared the information with the school board, was thrilled, and also wrote a newspaper article for the school newspaper. This so really only actually helped because I went in and talked to the class, but it could be done again. Also, the school has had and still has a video class, and at the time, the video class captured the dedication of the solar array. That happens only once, and so this is on YouTube, and I'll put the link in the credits here that you can check it out if you like. So moving on down the street from Annalie High School, we walked over to which now the restaurant on the highway. It's called Comloy, and there are some townhouses behind it, some lofts, work-live spaces that were built around 2010. They are unique in the sense that actually, they were built in 2006, and they used a product from a company called Unisolar, and it was an integrated solar product. And they used to call that peel and stick. So they peel off the sticky or protective backing and stick it onto these metal roofs, and the metal roofs then clip on, or they go up on the roof. So at first glance, you're not really able to tell that it's a solar array, but it is. The one trade-off is this particular product, the efficiency is only 6% efficient, meaning converting 6% of incoming sunlight to electricity. And for reference, the most efficient panels of that era most commonly was more in the 10 to 15% efficient. So this is probably half of that, but there's trade-offs. So the cost to install was about the same, but you didn't get as much energy per area. But it looks good and it's still working. And if for any reason it stops working, one can put a traditional solar module over these if one wants to. So let's see what else. This company no longer exists, Unisolar. There are others that are trying to make what this is a thin film solar material, and it uses amorphous silicon, and it's tuned to different bands of the light band. Oh, I'm not saying it right, but it's tuned to blue, red, yellow lights to get the most energy out of the sunlight. There are other thin film materials that are being experimented with and made into solar modules as well, which I should say that the most common material making solar cells, photovoltaic cells, is silicon, making up probably 95% of all solar modules in the world, and is the most, so it's the most common material for that. But there are others, and here's one of them. So then from there, we walked down Florence and met up with Kenna Lee, who's, among other things, a member of the Sebastopol's Climate Action Committee. And Kenna, who's shown here standing in front of her home, shared with us why when she bought this house not too long ago and remodeled it, she added solar plus batteries. So one of the reasons for batteries is that you still are connected to the utility grid, but if and when is a power outage, that the system automatically switches over to the battery system and you continue to have power. Whereas other systems we've seen so far, the police department, the school, et cetera, and Comloy, where there is no battery and there is solar, when the grid outage happens, the solar system is designed to shut down. And that's just by law. And so reasons there are mainly to protect any linemen and such from who might be working on the power lines from being, any risk to that by sending electricity out to the grid from the solar array. So without batteries, your solar system is shut down and doesn't work. But with batteries, you can have power during power outages. And the other thing you can do, and Kenna shared a whole her motivation for doing this, was to also give back to the neighborhood and the greater grid operation as we put more and more renewable energy onto the grid, powering the grid with wind and large solar, that we need to be able to store that energy that's available during the day or at certain times for when we need it other times. So batteries are becoming a bigger and bigger part of going forward as we put in solar systems on our own homes and buildings, as well as part of the grid. So the other thing she shared, what was it? Oh, yes. So going forward, this is a kind of a system that you might consider as you go forward. If you were to install solar today, one of the things that happened in April of 2023 was that the Public Utility Commission changed the net energy metering rules. And net metering basically refers to how much the solar electricity that's generated on your rooftop is worth. And so in the past, it's been that it was worth whatever you were otherwise would have paid the utility for electricity. So it was the retail value, basically, is what they say, how they describe that. But the new rules, and that was very economical, works out very well for the economics for installing solar. But the rules were changed so that you get a lot less for your any exported solar electricity from your home to the grid. So that's valued a lot less, which would motivate folks to then potentially store that excess energy during the day into a battery and then utilize that, your battery, to power your evening loads at home instead of paying for high priced electricity, which is the 4 to 9 p.m. Time frame. So I probably need a graph to show that, but I don't have one. Anyway, this is basically what a system would look like going forward. Kenna also explained that she had decarbonized the rest of her house as well, meaning she cut the cord on her gas line by switching to all electric appliances for her vehicles, for her hot water system, for heating and cooling her home, and cooking in the kitchen. Everything is all electric. So by doing that, you can also utilize more of the solar generation on your home inside your home without exporting, and that way you get maximum value for your system. Okay, thank you, Kenna. From there, we moved on down to the fire station. And this is another Solar Sebastopol initiated project back in 03, 04, 05, somewhere in there. This system is facing southwest, which generally works pretty well to displace that late afternoon high-priced utility power. One comment about the fire department solar system is that, the headline here says 2/3 of the way to a microgrid. And just as a background, the fire department also has a gas powered generator on site for when there is a power outage and they need to operate, because the fire department, along with the police department, are both emergency control centers for city of Sebastopol. So to become a really robust microgrid, the city might consider adding a battery into the mix. You got solar plus battery plus generator is a combination that of many locations are doing for resilient power sourcing of a location, so that you don't have to have massive batteries to get through whatever emergency you need. You can use your generator to top off the batteries if it's winter or there's smoky conditions or some other reason the solar system's not able to keep up with powering the building. So something to think about. From there, we moved around the corner to Ives Pool, just across the way. And this, again, is another project that was done in the early days of Solar Sebastopol. One thing you might be able to see from this photo is that you can see the rails extending on the solar system on the roof there. And that's because these are not the original panels. The original panels, after about 10 years, started failing. And they, fortunately, there was a warranty and a fund set up that honored the warranty to replace them. And they were replaced with a different brand of solar module, which by that time, the efficiency of the panels were a lot higher than the original ones. And so the warranties basically said they had to replace the equivalent power rating of the original system. And so this system is able to do that in a smaller area. So they didn't need to fill up the whole roof system with panels to get the same amount of power, if that makes sense. And this system is not heating the water of the pool. There is a gas heater for that purpose, but it does run all the electrical needs at the pool system. Some folks on the tour asked about solar water heating, and we had a conversation about other types of solar collectors in the past that have heated. It used to have a solar pool water heating system on this pool pre 2000 actually, but that was ultimately replaced with this photovoltaic solar electric system. So that's a different type of solar system, and that's not shown here. That is for heating water specifically. As we walked further, I pointed out a little house on the corner there past Veterans Building, Arts Building, that has west-facing solar array with trees growing, and shading more of their system. This system, I will point out that in the past, most of the systems were run by a single inverter. All these panels would have been wired in series and then run down to a single inverter, converting the DC of the solar to AC of the home and the grid on the side of the house. And unfortunately, when you have them all in series, if you shade one panel, you drop the output of most of the whole array pretty dramatically. So this system could use some tree trimming because it has a single string inverter on the side of the house. We'll see here in a bit how other sites deal with that better. So as we walk down the road further, we pointed out a system that is on a little garage. Turns out you don't see it here, but on this just south of here, there's a big redwood tree that's on the neighbor's property that shades the house and made it an unacceptable place to put the solar array. But over here, not too bad. And what's different nowadays is that each of these panels have their own micro-inverter. So each panel has an inverter converting DC to AC. And if there's shade on one panel, it just affects that one panel, the reduction of power instead of the whole array. So that's turned out to be a nice evolution of solar products, is the inverter and being able to reduce the impacts of shade. So we continued walking down. We ended up down at the bottom of where, I don't know how to say this. This is where Highway 116, as you're coming into town, splits. And at that little triangle there is something called the Sun Dragon. This also had its origins with Solar Sebastopol, but this is late 2008. And this project was instigated by Michael Keyes, who was a energy expert, worked in the field, and became city councilman and mayor of Sebastopol and some thereafter, after this was installed. But he and some other folks designed this wavy looking system, each on a pole, its own pole, to create sort of this serpentine dragon look. And also it's facing sort of southwest, so their intention was to produce the most power during the time when it's most expensive from the utility. So they achieved that, and it is still working today. Most of the power goes into this is a city well that's right behind it, and most of it goes into powering the electricity needs for powering the pumps for the well, the city of Sebastopol. And so that helps reduce the cost of buying electricity for powering those pumps. All right, so then we walked back up 116 and ended up by the Ford building, which is across the street from Community Market. The Ford building, in case you didn't know, used to be a Ford dealership years ago, but it's been transformed. And in some years ago, about 5 years ago, which means that 2016, the owner decided to remodel this building and create a lot of tenant spaces that you could rent out. So the one thing that's kind of unique about this system is something called virtual net metering, or VNEM. And that means that a single solar array on the roof the energy credits that are generated from there can be shared with the individual tenants. So the owner can basically, through software, allocate credits to the individual tenants in the building. And that can also be applied to multifamily housing, this type of shared credits kind of system. I will say that, so yeah, I'll say that that's still an option today in 2023, if makes it a lot easier. In the past, the rules required that you put a solar array with a dedicated inverter that went hardwired to each utility meter. And that created a lot of logistical nightmares and extra costs that weren't really necessary. So this helps. This was an improvement and is still working well today. Then we walked over to these new townhouses called Barlow Crossing, which is behind the bike shop. And we could see solar arrays on the roof. What's intriguing about this system, it represents new construction, and it reminded us that back in believe it was, let's see, 2014, 2013, 2014, that the city of Sebastopol was one of two cities that adopted a solar ordinance that required new construction, both residential and commercial, to include a minimum amount of solar. So this was a city ordinance. Sebastopol and the city of Lancaster in Southern California were the only ones that required that. And so, but when this was built, this housing development, it was the state of California had adopted that requirement for all residential new construction, which went into effect in January of 2020. These buildings were finished in 2022. So this is an example of new construction requiring some solar. But as we saw, let me see if there's another photo. So this is the backside, or west facing, and you'll notice that there's a lot of vents and funny little gables that basically get in the way of some really good solar rooftop, where you could otherwise have put some solar arrays, but instead they put a lot of vents in the way, which can be moved to the other side of north side if they were smart enough. So that needs a little improvement, I would say, going forward with other construction. Is there isn't that much care taken. That seems to be a common problem, putting vents in the wrong spaces. Also observed there's a carport in the parking lot that could have hosted another solar array, but that wasn't required by the city or the state of California, so it wasn't done. From there, we walked across the street onto Morris, and we stopped in front of Solmetric, which is a company that was founded by Willard McDonald a number of years ago. Willard actually started making these analysis tools in his dad's garage in Bolinas way back when, and it's merged into a company that makes these shading analysis tools, and also basically these tools to analyze how well large solar farms are functioning, and so that the operators can tune them up and get the most out of them. And their C cells, they make and sell tools all around the world. So that's here in Sebastopol, and it's something. It's a few years ago, Willard and his partners sold the company, the larger company, that then kind of forgot about them. And Willard and his partner bought it back about 2 years ago and is going strong and developing new products. So from there, we're almost done. We walked down the street into the Barlow and stood in front of Woodford Brewing Company, which you can see there is a unique solar array. It's which generated, I'll say past tense because it's no longer working, electricity plus heat. And this slide shows a similar system that was over in Grayton that was ground mounted, and we could take pictures of it closer up. But basically the idea is that this concave dish tracks the sun and reflects sunlight onto the receiver in the center, which is lined with photovoltaic solar cells, and which produce electricity. And then there are some tubes behind the solar cells that pass water over it, carrying the heat away. And the heat is really sort of the big item that the brewery was after. And so they can get this heat to clean their big brewing tanks and so forth. And the idea was with this company, this was in 2010, Cogenera would pay to install the system and would sign a contract with Woodford and the host to sell electricity and hot heat or hot water at a cheaper rate than they would otherwise pay at the utility. So that was the business model. And unfortunately, Cogenera went out of business, and I believe there's no one there to operate the system. So sometimes good ideas, innovative ideas, don't always work. And I would imagine that if somebody wanted to learn how to get this operating again, they could maybe get it going, because it's still up there on Woodford. As you can see, if you walk over at Taylor Coffee, you can take a look up on the roof and see the system. All right, so back at the plaza, we're done, and I want to thank you all for tuning in. My name's Tor at rahus.org. I host Sebastopol Carbon Conversations at the Grange. You can see the website there and what's currently scheduled. And also we run the Solar Schoolhouse program, which is a solar education program for K-12 schools. Thanks, and we'll catch you later.